She was just the black maid who scrubbed his floors until the Manhattan billionaire slid a surrogacy contract across the marble and asked her to carry his dead wife's last embryo. 9 months, $250,000, and one forbidden heartbeat later. McKenna Brooks isn't just carrying his child. She's carrying feelings she was never paid for. What she doesn't know is that there's a buried family secret that makes this baby more hers than his, and when that truth explodes, whose heart will she have to break to walk away? McKenna Brooks stared at the number and forgot how to breathe. $250,000. Typed in bold black ink on expensive paper that smelled like money she'd never touched. Her hands shook as she held the folder, standing in a penthouse kitchen so white and clean it didn't feel real. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered like a promise she'd never been invited to keep. "Read it," Grayson Hale said from across the marble island. His voice was quiet, tired, the kind of tired that lives in your bones. "Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story." McKenna's eyes moved over the words but couldn't make sense of them. Surrogacy, embryo transfer, compensation structure, legal terms she didn't understand wrapped around one thing she did. $250,000. Her mother's face flashed in her mind. Layla, thin now, too thin, lying in a bed that smelled like disinfectant, and dying hope, telling McKenna not to worry, that God would provide, that everything would work out. But God wasn't paying hospital bills, and the cancer didn't care about faith. "You don't have to say yes," Grayson said, pulling her back. "I need you to know that." She finally looked up. Storm gray eyes, dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it for days. A man who owned half of Manhattan, but stood barefoot in his own kitchen, like he didn't know where else to go. She'd been cleaning his penthouse for 6 months, twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. She knew where he kept his coffee, knew he watched the same video of his late wife on repeat, knew he hadn't opened the door at the end of the hallway since the day she started working here. Grief lived in this apartment. She could feel it in every perfect, untouched corner. "Why me?" McKenna heard herself ask. Her voice sounded small, foreign. Grayson leaned forward, elbows on the marble. "Because I trust you," he said simply. "Because you show up. Because when you think no one's watching, you care about things that don't belong to you. I've seen it." Something in her chest cracked. "I'm your maid, Mr. Hale," she whispered. "I scrub your floors. I'm not the kind of person who does this." "What kind of person does this?" he asked. She didn't have an answer. He slid a pen across the counter. "The embryo is from my late wife," he said. "Elise. We did IVF. 3 rounds, 2 miscarriages. The 3rd time, we thought we were safe. Then the accident happened." His voice caught. "They saved 1 embryo. Just 1. It's all I have left of her. Of us. I've spent 2 years trying to figure out if using it without her here is selfish, or if letting it go is worse." He looked at her with eyes that had cried themselves empty. "I want this baby," he said. "But I don't want to hand that responsibility to a stranger from some agency who'll disappear the moment the contract ends. I thought of you." McKenna's throat burned. The folder sat between them like a bomb. Her entire future, her mother's life, her little sister Jana's chance at college, all of it, sitting in a neat stack of legal papers on a marble counter in a world that wasn't hers. "If you walk away right now," Grayson said, "I'll still pay you for your time. I'll find another way. You don't owe me this." But that was the problem. She didn't owe him anything. So why did saying no feel like it would haunt her for the rest of her life? Her fingers hovered over the folder. She thought about her mother's hospital bed, about Yana's worn-out shoes, about the ceiling in their Bronx apartment that shook every time the train passed. Then she thought of something even scarier than saying yes. What if she said no? The first ceiling McKenna remembered shook when the trains passed. She was 7 years old, lying in a twin bed in a bedroom barely big enough to turn around in. The walls were thin, paper thin. She could hear Mrs. Chen next door yelling at her husband in Cantonese. Could hear the couple upstairs fighting about money again. The apartment sat above a laundromat in the Bronx. Everything smelled like detergent and fried food from the bodega on the corner. Her mother called it temporary. "We're not staying here forever, baby," Layla would say, collapsing onto the couch after a double shift at the nursing home. "I don't know how yet, but this is not the end of our story." Makena believed her. Back then, she believed a lot of things. She believed her mother's cough was just a cough, that the weight loss was just stress, that the bruises on her arms were from bumping into things at work. Until the day Lila came home from the doctor and didn't say a word, just sat at the kitchen table, staring at a piece of paper. Makena was 16. "Mom?" she'd said, dropping her backpack by the door. Layla looked up, eyes red, face hollow. "It's cancer," she whispered. Two words that split Makena's life into before and after. The medical bills came in thick envelopes, the kind that felt heavy in your hands. The kind you were afraid to open because you already knew what was inside. Numbers that didn't make sense, numbers that kept growing. Makena tried college, 1 semester at community. She loved it. Loved her psychology professor, who told her she asked smart questions. Loved the library that stayed open late. Loved feeling like maybe she could be more than just another girl from the Bronx who disappeared into the system. But by Christmas, her mother couldn't work anymore, and the bills didn't stop. So Makena withdrew, packed up her textbooks, walked away from the only dream she'd ever had for herself. She picked up work wherever she could find it: hotel housekeeping, coffee shop shifts at 5 in the morning, cleaning gigs from an agency that sent her into buildings where even the doormen looked expensive. Be invisible, they told her on the first day. Clean well, talk little, don't act impressed. Rich people don't want to remember you exist. She followed orders, because she needed the money more than she needed her pride. How many people do we pass every day who are 1 bill away from breaking? If this feels familiar, you're not alone. One Tuesday, the agency added a new address to her schedule. A penthouse, Manhattan, 53rd floor. The name on the work order made her pause. Client, Grayson Hale. She'd seen that name before, in headlines, on the side of buildings, in finance blogs her ex-boyfriend used to read, back when she thought love could save her from drowning. Grayson Hale, billionaire, venture capitalist. The kind of man whose worst day was still better than her best year. The first time she rode the private elevator up to his floor, her stomach twisted. The doors opened into a hallway that smelled like wealth. Clean, quiet, cold. She knocked. No one answered. She used the key the agency gave her and stepped inside, and forgot how to breathe. Floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the entire city. Furniture that looked like art. A kitchen made of white marble and steel. Everything perfect. Everything untouched. Like a museum. Like no one really lived there. She stood in the entryway, gripping her cleaning caddy, and thought, I don't belong here. This world wasn't made for girls like her. Girls with cheap sneakers and borrowed coats. Girls who rode the subway for an hour just to scrub someone else's toilet. Girls who fell asleep counting bills instead of sheep. She didn't belong here. She didn't know yet how wrong that was. She expected a butler to answer the door. Maybe a house manager in a crisp suit. Someone paid to be polite. Someone whose job was to make sure the help knew their place. Instead, when the door swung open on her second visit, there he was, Grayson Hale. In real life, he looked nothing like the pictures. The headlines showed a man in tailored suits, sharp jawline, confident smile, the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers and Forbes lists. But standing in front of her now, barefoot on hardwood that probably cost more than her mother's car, he looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Dark hair, messy, white dress shirt wrinkled, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, no tie, no shoes. Just a man who looked like he'd forgotten how to be a billionaire. You're from the agency? He asked. His voice was rough, tired. Yes, sir, Makena said, gripping her supply caddy tighter. I'm Makena. Something flickered across his face when he heard her name. Gone before she could name it. Grayson, he said, stepping back to let her in. You already know that, I'm sure. She tried to smile. It came out awkward, kind of hard to miss. she said. Your face is everywhere. He let out a breath that might have been a laugh. Might have been something sadder. Inside, the penthouse looked like a magazine spread. Glass walls. Neutral colors. A view of the city that made Manhattan look small and manageable. Like you could hold it in your hands if you just reached out far enough. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. But as McKenna walked deeper into the space, setting her caddy down by the kitchen island, she started to see the cracks. A gray sweater draped over the back of a chair near the window. A pair of ballet flats by the door. Small. Delicate. Dust gathering on the toes. A photo frame on the console table in the hallway, turned face down. A perfect circle of dust around it, like someone had flipped it over in a hurry and never flipped it back. And the smell? Faint. Almost gone. But still there if you paid attention. Floral perfume. Expensive. The kind that clung to fabric and air long after the person who wore it was gone. McKenna's chest tightened. She'd cleaned enough houses to recognize what this was. Grief. The kind that didn't announce itself. The kind that hid in corners and closets and drawers that stayed shut because opening them hurt too much. Grayson moved through the space like a ghost in his own home. He didn't look at the shoes. Didn't touch the sweater. Didn't go near the console table. I'll be in my office if you need anything, he said quietly, already turning away. Take your time, McKenna nodded. She waited until she heard the door at the end of the hall click shut before she let herself breathe. Then she started cleaning. She wiped down counters that didn't need wiping, vacuumed floors that barely had dust, straightened pillows that were already straight. But she didn't touch the shoes, didn't move the sweater, didn't flip the photo frame. Some things weren't hers to fix. An hour later, she was dusting the living room when she heard it. A sound. Soft. Barely there. She froze. It was coming from down the hall. From the office where Grayson had disappeared. A voice. No. A recording. A woman's voice. Laughing. Bright and full of life. Gray, stop it. You're going to drop me. More laughter. Then Grayson's voice. Younger. Lighter. I've got you. I always have you. McKenna's hand stilled on the shelf. She shouldn't be listening, but she couldn't move. The silence that followed the recording was heavier than the sound itself. And suddenly, McKenna understood. This penthouse wasn't just quiet because rich people liked quiet. It was quiet because someone was missing. Someone who used to laugh in these rooms. Someone who used to leave shoes by the door and sweaters on chairs. Someone whose face was in that frame, turned down because looking at it was too hard. It wasn't just rich people silence. It was grief. She just didn't know whose yet. For weeks, McKenna cleaned around things she didn't understand. A dresser drawer in the bedroom that was never opened. She dusted around it. Never tried the handle. A door at the end of the hallway that stayed closed. She vacuumed up to it. Never knocked. A walk-in closet where the air still smelled like floral perfume and something deeper. Something that felt like loss had soaked into the walls. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she showed up. Cleaned what needed cleaning. Left what needed leaving. And every time, she found a tablet propped on the kitchen counter. Paused on the same video. A woman with curly hair and warm brown eyes, leaning into the camera, laughing at something off-screen. Gray, you're terrible at this, the woman said, still laughing. Just press the red button. It's not that hard. The video would freeze there, right on her smile. One day, McKenna heard Grayson whisper a name to the screen. Elise. Soft. Broken. Like saying it out loud cost him something. McKenna looked her up that night on her phone. Sitting on the subway home, wedged between a man who smelled like cigarettes and a teenager with headphones too loud, she typed the name into Google. Elise Hale. The articles came up immediately. Philanthropist and wife of billionaire Grayson Hale, dies in car accident on FDR Drive. Pregnant wife of venture capitalist, killed in tragic collision. Grayson Hale's wife, Elise, remembered as kind, generous, and full of life. McKenna scrolled through the photos. Elise at charity galas. Elise laughing at a fundraiser. Elise with her hand on a small baby bump. Grayson's arm around her waist, both of them glowing. The date on that photo made McKenna's stomach drop, 3 weeks before the accident. She closed her phone, stared out the train window at the blurred lights of the city, and for the first time, she understood why the penthouse felt the way it did. It wasn't a home, it was a tomb. We all carry losses no one sees. If you've ever hidden your pain, drop a heart below. Weeks turned into months. Makena learned to move quietly, to clean without disturbing the ghosts. She never heard anyone else's voice in that apartment. No friends stopping by, no family calling, just the grocery deliveries, the occasional assistant dropping off documents, and Makena, twice a week, wiping down surfaces that barely got dirty. Grayson was always there, always working, always alone. Sometimes she'd catch him standing by the window, staring out at the city like he was looking for something he'd lost and couldn't find. Other times, she'd hear that video playing again, Elise's laugh echoing through perfect, empty rooms. Makena never said anything. What could she say? But one Thursday in late autumn, everything changed. She thought he wasn't home. His office door was open. His coat wasn't on the hook. The apartment felt emptier than usual, so when she walked past the hallway mirror and caught sight of her own reflection, tired and worn down and barely holding it together, something inside her cracked. She'd gotten the call an hour before her shift. Her mother's doctor, calm, clinical. "We need to discuss next steps. The treatments aren't working as well as we'd hoped." Makena had nodded, said okay, hung up, then got on the subway and came to work. Because what else was she supposed to do? But standing in that hallway now, surrounded by someone else's grief, her own finally broke through. She pressed her hand over her mouth, tried to hold it in, failed. The tears came fast, silent, the kind that hurt your chest because you've been holding them too long. She slid down the wall, sat on the expensive hardwood floor, let herself fall apart in a hallway that didn't belong to her, and then she heard footsteps. Her head snapped up. Grayson stood at the end of the hall, still in his dress shirt, no shoes, eyes wide. He'd been home the whole time, and he'd heard everything. Makena wiped her face quickly, tried to stand. "I'm sorry," she said, voice shaking. "I didn't think you were here. I'll just stop," he said quietly. He walked closer, slowly, like he was afraid she'd run. Then he did something she didn't expect. He sat down on the floor beside her, not across from her, not standing over her, beside her, in his own hallway, in his expensive clothes, like it didn't matter. "I know what it looks like," he said softly, staring straight ahead. "When someone's breaking." His voice was so gentle it made her chest ache. "You don't have to tell me why," he continued. "But you also don't have to hide it. Not here." Makena stared at him. This man who barely knew her. This billionaire who just sat on the floor because she was crying. And for the first time in months, she felt seen, not like the help, like a person. He never asked about her grief that day, didn't push, didn't pry, just sat with her until she could breathe again. But Makena knew, somehow, that this moment mattered, that something between them had shifted. He never asked about hers, not until the day she broke her own rule. The day the doctor said, "Next round of chemo." Something in Makena's chest cracked clean through. She sat in the small consultation room with her mother, holding Layla's hand while the doctor slid papers across the table like they were discussing a car payment and not her mother's life. "We'll need to start immediately," he said, tapping his pen against the treatment plan. "I know, it's a lot. A lot." Makena stared at the bill. The numbers didn't look real. They looked like a mistake, like someone had added too many zeros by accident. But the doctor's face told her everything she needed to know. This was real. And they didn't have it. On the subway ride home, Makena pulled out her phone, opened her banking app, did the math she'd done 100 times before. Rent, groceries, her mother's current medications, her little sister Jana's, school supplies. Nothing added up. No matter how many times she moved the numbers around, they never added up. That night, after getting her mother settled into bed, Makena found Lila sitting up against the pillows, awake, staring at nothing. "Mom, you need to sleep," Makena said gently. "I need to tell you something first," Lila said. Her voice was different, tired in a way that had nothing to do with cancer. She patted the edge of the bed. Sit. McKenna sat. Layla reached under her pillow and pulled out a small envelope. Old, worn at the edges. The kind you keep hidden for years, because opening it means facing things you're not ready to face. I should have told you sooner, Layla said quietly, but I didn't know how. And then it felt too late. She handed McKenna the envelope. Inside was a single photograph, faded, creased down the middle like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. A younger Layla stood outside a diner, smiling, her arm hooked through the arm of a tall man in a suit. The man was light-skinned, clean-cut, expensive watch flashing in the sun. His smile was polite, controlled, the kind of smile people wear when they're pretending. McKenna's throat went dry. Who is this? She asked. Your father, Layla said. The words landed like a slap. McKenna had asked about her father exactly twice in her life. Both times, her mother had said the same thing. He's gone, and he's not coming back. That was it. No name, no story, just gone. But here he was, in a photograph, real, smiling. He was married, Layla said, voice flat, to someone else. I knew. I still let myself believe his lies. He said he was separated, that he was filing for divorce, that once everything was final, we'd be together. She let out a bitter laugh. I was so stupid. Mom, when I got pregnant with you, Layla continued, he sent money for a while, not much, just enough to make me think he cared. Then one day, the money stopped. I called. He didn't answer. I went to his office. Security turned me away. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. I chose my pride over his crumbs, she said. I decided I'd rather raise you alone than beg a man who didn't want us. McKenna's hands shook as she turned the photo over. On the back, written in faded blue ink, L+H, 1,989. H? McKenna asked, even though part of her already knew. Layla met her eyes. Henry, she said. Henry Hale. The name hit McKenna like a punch to the stomach. Hale. She'd heard that name before. Seen it on a door, on a folder, in gold letters in a lobby, on a contract she'd been too afraid to sign. Her father's last name was Hale, the same last name as the man whose floors she scrubbed, the man whose grief she cleaned around, the man who'd just offered her $250,000 to carry his child. McKenna's mind raced. It didn't make sense. It couldn't. Did he have family? McKenna asked, voice barely above a whisper. Other kids? Layla's face darkened. I don't know, she said. I never asked. I didn't want to know what I was competing with. McKenna stared at the photo, at the man who'd given her life, and then walked away like she didn't matter. At the expensive watch, the tailored suit, the smile that didn't reach his eyes. She thought about Grayson, about the way he looked at Elisa's photo, the way he said her name like it hurt, about the penthouse full of ghosts. Could they be connected? Were they family? Her stomach twisted. She'd seen that last name somewhere else, on a door, on a contract, in a world she didn't belong to, but she didn't say it out loud. Not yet. 2 days after the photo, the folder appeared on the marble counter. McKenna had just finished wiping down the kitchen when Grayson slid it toward her. He didn't look like a billionaire that morning. He looked like a man carrying the weight of his own ribs, eyes shadowed, jaw tight, like he'd spent all night building up the courage to do this and was already regretting it. Read it, he said. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic. McKenna's fingers hovered over the folder before she finally opened it. The words blurred at first. Surrogacy agreement, embryo transfer, gestational carrier. Legal terms wrapped around medical terms wrapped around a number that made her hands shake. Base compensation, $250,000. She got stuck there, on that number, on the commas and zeros that could change everything. Grayson watched her, waiting. Elise and I went through 3 rounds of IVF, he said finally, breaking the silence. His voice cracked on her name. 2 miscarriages. The first one? We told everyone. Got flowers and sympathy cards and people saying all the wrong things. The second one, we kept quiet. Didn't want to hear, "It'll happen when it's meant to be," one more time. He swallowed hard. The third time, we thought we were safe. 12 weeks, heard the heartbeat. Saw her moving on the screen. We let ourselves believe. McKenna's chest tightened. She knew how this story ended. They saved one embryo, Grayson continued. Just one, before the accident. It's frozen, waiting. It's all I have left of her, of us, of the life we were supposed to have. His eyes met hers. I've spent 2 years asking myself if using it without her here is selfish, if I'm trying to bring back something that's already gone, if I even deserve to be a father after I couldn't save her. That wasn't your fault, McKenna said before she could stop herself. He looked at her like he wanted to believe that, like he'd tried 1,000 times and failed. I want this baby, he said simply. Her baby. Our baby. But I don't want to hand that responsibility to a stranger from some agency catalog. Someone I'll never see again after the contract ends. Someone who'll carry my child like it's just another job. He leaned forward. I thought of you, he said. The words hit her like a wave. Why me? McKenna asked, voice barely there. I'm your maid, Mr. Hale. I scrub your floors. I'm not some perfect candidate from a brochure with a college degree and a clean family history. Because you don't flinch from hard things, Grayson said. Because you show up even when it hurts. Because I've seen you laugh with your mother on the phone like she's the most important person in the world. And I've seen you cry in my hallway like the weight of everything is sitting on your chest. His voice softened. I've seen you, McKenna. Not the maid. You. Her throat burned. You care about things that don't belong to you, he continued. You straighten picture frames you're not supposed to touch. You fold blankets no one asked you to fold. You move through this apartment like you understand what it means to lose something and still keep going. He held her gaze. I trust you, he said. And trust isn't something I give easily anymore. The silence between them felt heavy, real. Some decisions haunt you, either way. Have you ever faced a choice like this? Tell me in the comments. McKenna looked down at the folder again, at the number that could save her mother. Pay for Jenna's future. Get them out of that apartment where the ceiling shook and the walls were too thin. But this wasn't just about money. This was her body, her life. 9 months of carrying someone else's dream, of growing attached to something she'd have to give away, of walking back into this penthouse after it was all over and pretending nothing had changed. If you walk away right now, Grayson said quietly, I'll still pay you for your time, for listening. I'll find another way. You don't owe me this. He meant it. She could see it in his eyes. He wasn't trying to trap her, wasn't using his money to pressure her. He was giving her a choice, a real one. But that made it harder, because if he'd been cruel or manipulative, she could have said no and felt good about it. Instead, he was kind, honest, human, and that made saying no feel impossible. McKenna stared at the folder, at the contract that could save her family or ruin her life, at the pen sitting beside it, waiting. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, thin, tired, fading. Then Jana's voice. Will Mom be okay? Then Grayson's. I trust you. Her hand moved toward the pen, then stopped. She looked up at him. If I say yes, she whispered. What happens to me after? Grayson's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. I don't know, he said honestly, but I promise you won't be alone. And somehow, that promise scared her more than anything else, because it meant this wasn't just a transaction. It was a beginning. So why did it feel like saying no would haunt her forever? The hotel break room smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. McKenna sat at the tiny table in the corner, contract folded in her bag like a loaded gun, while her best friend Tiana stirred sugar into her mug like it owed her rent money. Repeat that again, Tiana said, not looking up. Slower this time, because I know I didn't just hear you say what I think I heard. A billionaire wants me to carry his last embryo, McKenna said quietly. For $250,000. Tiana's spoon stopped mid-stir. She looked up, stared. Then she whistled low. Girl, she said, shaking her head. That's not a plot twist. That's God looking down and saying, You know what? I'm bored. Let's see what happens. It's not funny, McKenna muttered, rubbing her temples. It's not funny, Tiana agreed. It's insane. There's a difference. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. Do you want to do it? The question sat between them like a third person. McKenna's chest tightened. I want my mom to live, she said. I want my sister to be able to go to college without drowning in debt. I want to stop choosing between rent and groceries every month. But this? She pressed her hands flat on the table. This is my body, Tiana, my whole life. 9 months of carrying someone else's baby, getting attached, handing it over. Then what? I go back to cleaning his penthouse like nothing happened? Like I didn't just grow a whole human being for him? Tiana sipped her coffee, thinking, what if you mess it up? She asked. Exactly. What if you fall in love with the baby and can't let go? Exactly. What if people find out and judge you for the rest of your life? McKenna's voice cracked. They're going to say I sold myself, she whispered. That I'm desperate. That I let some rich white man use my body because I needed the money. Tiana's face softened. Or, she said gently, what if you save your mom's life? What if you give your sister a future? What if you find out you're stronger than you ever thought possible? McKenna shook her head. You don't get it. This isn't just about being strong. It's about people looking at me different, treating me different. My whole life, I've been invisible. The girl who cleans, the girl who keeps her head down. If I do this, I won't be invisible anymore. I'll be the girl who carried a billionaire's baby for money. So what? Tiana shot back. People judge you for breathing. Let them judge you on a beach somewhere, paid for in cash. She reached across the table, grabbed McKenna's hand. Listen to me, she said. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm not saying it won't change you. But you need to ask yourself something real. She squeezed tighter. Are you saying no because you don't want to do it? Or are you saying no because you're scared of what people will think? McKenna's eyes burned. Both, she admitted. Okay, Tiana said. That's fair. But here's the thing. Fear is always going to be there. Fear of failing, fear of judgment, fear of losing yourself. But you can't let fear make all your choices for you. She let go of McKenna's hand. If you do this, do it because you choose to, not because the world backed you into a corner. And if you don't do it because you're too afraid of what people might say. McKenna stared down at her own hands, at the calluses from scrubbing floors, at the dry skin from cheap soap, at the fingers that had held her mother's hand through chemo and wiped her sister's tears when things got bad. These hands had always given, always sacrificed, always held other people up. What if, just once, she let them reach for something she wanted, even if it scared her, even if people judged her, even if she didn't know how it would end? Later that night, McKenna lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling that still shook when the trains passed. The contract sat on her nightstand, unopened, waiting. Fear had driven so much of her life. Fear of losing her mother, fear of failing, fear of being too much or not enough, fear of wanting things she wasn't supposed to want. Fear had kept her small, kept her safe, kept her invisible, but it had also kept her trapped. Tiana's words echoed in her head. Are you doing this because you choose to? Or because fear is making the choice for you? McKenna closed her eyes, felt the weight of the question pressing down on her chest, and wondered, for the first time in her life, what would happen if she stopped letting fear decide? What if, for once, she said yes anyway? McKenna waited until her mother had a good day before bringing it up. A day when Lila could sit up without wincing, when the nausea wasn't so bad she couldn't keep water down, when her eyes looked more alive than empty. Those days were rare now. McKenna sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, trying to find the right words. But Layla spoke first. You're about to tell me something I'm not going to like, she said, voice weak but knowing. McKenna's throat tightened. How do you know? Because you've been avoiding me for 3 days? Lila said. And you only avoid me when you're carrying something heavy. She patted the mattress beside her. Sit. Tell me. So McKenna did. She told her about the offer, the contract, the money. The billionaire with storm gray eyes and a dead wife, and one last chance at being a father. She told her everything. Except the part about his last name. About Henry Hale. About the man in the photograph who might connect them in ways McKenna didn't understand yet. When she finished, Layla closed her eyes. Said nothing for a long time. A surrogacy, she finally repeated, voice flat. McKenna nodded. It's legal, Mom. The agency handles everything. It's his embryo, his late wife's. They already did all the medical tests. I'd just be a vessel? Layla supplied. The word hit like a slap. I'd be helping, McKenna said, voice cracking. Helping him. Helping us. $250,000. That's your treatment paid for. Jana's college. A place that doesn't shake when the train passes. Lila opened her eyes, looked at her daughter with something that felt like grief. When I was your age, she said slowly, I thought my body was all I had to offer. To men. To this country. To survive. It took me years to learn I was more than that. She reached for McKenna's hand. Squeezed weakly. I don't want you to learn that lesson the hard way. This isn't like that, McKenna insisted. I'm not sleeping with him. I'm not selling myself. I'm choosing this. On my terms. Are they your terms? Layla asked quietly. Or are they the world's terms? The world that made it so a young black woman has to rent out her womb just to pay for her mother's medicine? McKenna's eyes burned. What's the alternative? She whispered. I watch you get sicker because we can't afford the treatment. I let Jana drop out of school to help pay bills. I keep scrubbing floors until my hands bleed and it's still not enough? Her voice broke. Mom, I'd do anything to keep you here. Anything. Layla's face crumpled. That's what scares me, she said, because I know you mean it. And I know you'll carry this choice for the rest of your life, no matter how it turns out. She pulled McKenna closer. Listen to me, she said. I don't want you to confuse sacrifice with disappearing. You've been disappearing your whole life, dropping out of school, working 3 jobs, putting everyone else first. And I let you because I needed you. Tears slid down her cheeks. But baby, you deserve a life that's about more than what you can give away. Mothers and daughters carry each other in ways the world never sees. Tag someone who sacrificed everything for you. McKenna pressed her forehead against her mother's shoulder. I don't know how else to save you, she whispered. You're not supposed to save me, Lila said. I'm supposed to save you. They sat like that for a long time. 2 women holding each other in a room that smelled like sickness and desperation. 2 women who'd survived on scraps and prayers and sheer stubbornness. 2 women who loved each other enough to break. When McKenna finally pulled away, her mother's eyes were closed again. Breathing shallow but steady, McKenna stood, tucked the blanket around Layla's thin shoulders, kissed her forehead. Then she walked to her own room, pulled the contract from her bag, stared at it for a long time. Her mother's words echoed in her head. You deserve a life that's about more than what you can give away. Maybe. But what if giving this away was the only way to keep the people she loved alive? What if sometimes love looked like sacrifice? What if sometimes survival meant breaking yourself a little so others could stay whole? McKenna picked up a pen. Her hand shook as she signed her name on the line. Neat, clear, final. She didn't feel powerful. She didn't feel like she was choosing herself. She felt like she was stepping off a cliff and hoping someone would catch her. But she signed anyway. Because sometimes love looks like doing the thing that breaks you a little. The fertility clinic didn't look like a hospital. It looked like a spa for rich people who bought babies the way they bought cars. Soft lighting, white leather couches, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than McKenna's entire apartment building. She sat in the cart, waiting room, hands folded in her lap, trying not to throw up from nerves. Grayson sat beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him, close enough to know he was just as terrified as she was. Miss Brooks? A nurse appeared in the doorway, smiling, clipboard in hand. We're ready for you. McKenna stood on shaky legs. The procedure room was cold, clinical. All steel and white tile and machines that beeped softly. She lay on the exam table in a thin gown, feet in cold stirrups, staring at the ceiling and wondering what the hell she'd gotten herself into. Grayson stood beside her, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the monitor. "This is weird," McKenna muttered. He let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "On the list of ways I thought my life would go," he said quietly, "this wasn't in the top 50. Try top 1,000, she shot back. He smiled. "Small. Real. But I'm glad it's you here," he added, "and not some stranger I've never met." Something in her chest tightened. The doctor walked in, cheerful, professional, like she did this every day, which she probably did. "All right," she said, pulling on gloves. "Let's make a baby." The whole thing took 20 minutes. 20 minutes to transfer an embryo that had been frozen for 2 years. 20 minutes to implant Elise's last chance at life into McKenna's body. 20 minutes that felt like 20 seconds and 20 hours all at once. "There," the doctor said finally, pointing at the screen. "That's the embryo." McKenna stared at the tiny bright spot on the monitor. So small, impossibly small. "That's her?" she whispered. "If she implants?" "Yes," the doctor said. "Now we wait. 10 days. That's how long they had to wait before taking a pregnancy test. 10 days that felt like 10 years. McKenna went back to work, back to her cramped apartment, back to her life like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Because somewhere inside her body, a cell was dividing, growing, deciding whether to hold on or let go. On day 10, McKenna woke up at 5 in the morning, couldn't go back to sleep. She walked to the bathroom, pulled the pregnancy test from the box she'd hidden under the sink. Her hands shook as she took it. Then, she set it on the counter and waited. 3 minutes. The longest 3 minutes of her life. She stared at the white stick like it held the answer to everything. One line meant no. Meant failure. Meant she'd signed that contract for nothing. 2 lines meant yes. Meant it worked. Meant her life was about to change in ways she couldn't take back. The first line appeared immediately. Bold. Clear. McKenna held her breath. Watched. Waited. And then, slowly, a second line started to appear. Faint at first, then stronger, undeniable. Her knees went weak. She grabbed the edge of the sink to keep from falling. Pregnant. She was pregnant. With Grayson Hale's baby. With Elise's baby. With a child that would never be hers, but would live inside her for 9 months. McKenna picked up her phone with trembling hands. Found his number. Pressed call. He answered on the first ring. "McKenna?" His voice was rough, like he'd been awake all night waiting. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Because this was real now. Not a contract. Not a plan. Not a what if. Real. "McKenna?" he said again. More urgent this time. "Are you okay?" She smiled through sudden tears. "Congratulations, Mr. Hale," she whispered. "Looks like you're going to be a dad." The silence on the other end stretched, long, heavy. She thought maybe the call had dropped, but then she heard him breathe. Heard the sound catch in his chest like he'd been holding it for 2 years and finally let go. "Thank you," he said. His voice broke on the words. "Thank you, McKenna." She closed her eyes, pressed her free hand against her still flat stomach, and realized something that terrified her more than the pregnancy itself. The silence on the other end wasn't empty. It was full, with something she didn't yet have a name for. Morning sickness hit like a full-time job. By week 6, McKenna was on a first-name basis with her toilet. Everything smelled wrong. Coffee, laundry detergent, the bodega on the corner. Even water tasted like metal and regret. She called in sick to 2 shifts, spent entire days on the bathroom floor, wondered if this was what dying felt like. On a Thursday evening, pale and shaky, she dragged herself to the front door to get the mail, and found a billionaire standing in her hallway, holding ginger ale and a paper bag from the pharmacy. "How did you get my address?" she croaked. Grayson looked almost embarrassed. "The agency," he said. "Don't worry. I threatened them with a lawsuit if they ever give it to anyone else." McKenna wanted to be mad, but she was too tired, too nauseous, too grateful that someone had shown up. "You shouldn't be here," she muttered, stepping aside to let him in anyway. He looked painfully out of place in her tiny living room. His watch probably cost more than her entire couch. His shoes were cleaner than her floors. He stood there like a man who'd never been anywhere this small, this worn, this real. But he didn't leave. He rolled up his sleeves, set the ginger ale on the coffee table, pulled out crackers, anti-nausea wristbands, and something called Preggy Pops from the bag. The pharmacist said these help, he explained. McKenna sank onto the couch. You asked a pharmacist for pregnancy advice? I Googled first, he admitted. Then I panicked and went in person. Something about that made her want to cry. He sat beside her, not too close, but close enough, opened the ginger ale, poured it into a glass, handed it to her like it was the most important thing in the world. You don't have to stay, she said quietly. I know, he replied. I want to. Hours passed. The nausea didn't. But Grayson stayed anyway. He didn't talk much, didn't try to fix anything, just sat with her while some old sitcom played on low volume and the city buzzed outside her window. At some point, exhaustion won. McKenna's head dropped onto his shoulder. She was too tired to fight it, too tired to care that this was her boss, the man paying her, the man whose dead wife's baby was growing inside her, too tired to remember all the reasons this was a bad idea. She just needed someone, and he was there. Grayson didn't move, didn't pull away. He reached over slowly, carefully, like he was afraid she'd wake up and realize what was happening. And he rested his hand on her stomach, flat still, barely anything there. But something. The people who show up when you're at your lowest are the ones who matter. Who's shown up for you? Let them know below. McKenna woke up hours later to the sound of her phone buzzing. The apartment was dark, except for the glow of the TV. She was still on the couch, still leaning against Grayson. His hand was still on her stomach. She should move, should pull away, should remind herself that this was a contract, a transaction, a business arrangement that would end the moment she handed over his baby and walked out of his life. But she didn't move, because for the first time in weeks, she felt safe, not alone. Not like she was drowning, just safe. Grayson stirred beside her. Sorry, he mumbled, voice thick with sleep. I didn't mean to fall asleep. It's okay, she whispered. He started to pull his hand away, but she caught it, held it there. She's okay, McKenna said softly. The baby. She's okay. Grayson's eyes met hers in the dim light, and something passed between them, something that felt dangerous, forbidden, real. Thank you, he said, not for the update, for something bigger, for letting him be here, for letting him touch her stomach, for letting him feel connected to this tiny life that was half his, half Elise's, and somehow, impossibly, a little bit hers too. McKenna knew she should be building walls around her heart, should be keeping distance, should be remembering that when this was over, he'd take his daughter and go back to his world, and she'd go back to hers, and none of this would matter. But every time he looked at her like that, every time he showed up when she needed someone, every time he touched her stomach like it held the most precious thing in the world, another brick fell. So why did it feel like every time he came close, another brick fell? By the end of the first trimester, their routines had changed. It wasn't just doctor visits and ultrasound appointments anymore. It was text messages at 2 a.m. You awake? The baby app says she's the size of a lime now. How is that even possible? It was him showing up with groceries he accidentally ordered too much of. Organic everything. Fresh fruit. Things McKenna would never buy for herself because her budget didn't have room for strawberries that cost $8. It was inside jokes about the ridiculous baby names the pregnancy app suggested. Azalea, Persephone, Moonbeam. If you name her Moonbeam, McKenna had said, laughing, I'm keeping her out of principle. Grayson had smiled. But something in his eyes had flickered, like he wasn't sure if she was joking. They drove to appointments together now. Her in the passenger seat of his car that cost more than most people's houses. Him behind the wheel, one hand relaxed on the steering wheel, the other drumming against his thigh to whatever song was playing. Your taste in music is terrible, she'd said once, scrolling through his playlist. Says the woman who unironically listens to boy bands from 2002. He'd shot back. NSYNC is timeless. NSYNC is a crime against ears. She'd laughed so hard she'd snorted. And he'd looked at her like she'd done something incredible, like making him smile was the rarest thing in the world. One afternoon, McKenna was wiping down the already clean kitchen counter when Grayson walked in. "You're hovering," she teased, nodding at the rag in his hand. "Occupational hazard," he said, scrubbing at a spot that didn't exist. "Of what? Being rich?" He stopped, looked at her. "Being terrified," he said quietly. The air shifted. McKenna set down her rag. "Of what?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the counter like it held answers he didn't want to find. "That something will go wrong," he said finally. "That I'll lose her the way I lost Elise. That you'll—" He stopped himself. "That I'll what?" McKenna pressed. His jaw tightened. "That you'll run," he admitted. "Or realize this was a mistake. Or decide you can't do this. And I'll be standing here with nothing again." McKenna's chest ached. "I'm not running," she said. "How do I know that?" "Because I signed a contract," she said. "Because your daughter is growing inside me. Because I show up, Grayson. Even when it's hard. Even when it scares me. I show up." He looked at her then. Really looked at her. Not like she was the help. Not like she was the surrogate. Not like she was temporary. Like she was something permanent. Something he couldn't lose. "I know," he said softly. "That's what scares me most." She didn't know what to say to that. Sometimes, she caught him watching her. When she laughed at something on her phone. When she absent-mindedly rested her hand on her stomach. When she tilted her head back and closed her eyes because the baby was pressing on something uncomfortable and she just needed a second to breathe. He watched her like he was memorizing her. Like he was trying to figure out who she was beneath the surface. Beneath the girl who cleaned his floors and carried his grief and now carried his hope. Once, in the waiting room before an ultrasound, he'd said quietly, "Elise used to talk about wanting a sister." McKenna had looked up from the magazine. She wasn't really reading. "She grew up an only child," he continued, staring at the wall. She said it felt like standing on a stage alone, like there was no one in the wings who understood what the performance cost. His voice cracked. "I wish she'd had that. Someone who got it. Someone who stayed." McKenna's throat tightened. "I grew up wondering if I had a father," she said quietly. "If he ever thought about me. If I'd recognize him, if I passed him on the street. I guess we all have ghosts we're missing." Grayson turned to look at her, and the way he looked at her in that moment made her forget how to breathe. Like he saw straight through her shields. Through the walls she'd built to protect herself from people who had money and power and the ability to break her without even trying. Like he saw her. All of her. And wasn't afraid. McKenna knew this was dangerous. Knew she was playing with fire. Knew that somewhere between morning sickness and grocery deliveries and falling asleep on his shoulder, something had shifted between them. Something that couldn't be undone. She was supposed to keep her distance. Supposed to remember this was temporary. Supposed to hand over his daughter in 6 months and walk away like none of this had mattered. But the truth was, it already mattered. He mattered. And that terrified her more than anything. Because she'd spent her whole life being invisible. Being the girl no one noticed. The girl who cleaned up other people's messes and kept her head down and never asked for more than she was given. But Grayson saw her. And in that moment, staring at the ultrasound photos on the clinic wall, she wondered something that made her heart race. What would happen if he ever saw everything? At 14 weeks, the baby looked like an actual tiny person on the screen. McKenna lay on the exam table, shirt lifted, cool gel on her stomach, heart racing as the ultrasound wand pressed against her skin. Grayson stood beside her, one hand hovering just above her shoulder, close but not touching. Like he wanted to but wasn't sure if he was allowed. The nurse smiled, pressing the wand deeper. "Nice strong heartbeat," she said. "Do you want to hear it?" They both nodded. The sound filled the room. Fast, fierce, beautiful. Like a tiny war drum. McKenna's eyes burned. She'd heard it before. but every time felt like the first time, like proof that something impossible was real. Then she heard another sound, heels clicking down the hallway, sharp, precise, expensive. The door opened. "Sorry I'm late," a woman's voice said, breathless but controlled. Traffic was a nightmare. She stopped. Her gaze landed on McKenna, on her dark skin, on the curve of her stomach, on Grayson's hand so close to her shoulder it might as well have been touching. The air in the room changed. "Mom," Grayson said, straightening. "This is McKenna, the surrogate." Margaret Hale looked like old New York money. Neat silver bob, pearl earrings, navy blazer that probably cost more than McKenna's rent, an expression that had probably made waiters and CEOs nervous for decades. She was beautiful in that cold, untouchable way rich white women often were. "The surrogate," Margaret repeated slowly, her voice smooth as glass. "I see." Her eyes moved over McKenna like she was inspecting furniture. Not a person. An object. Something to be assessed, judged, priced. McKenna's stomach turned. The nurse cleared her throat, trying to break the tension. "That's your granddaughter's heartbeat," she said cheerfully, nodding toward the monitor. Margaret's face softened, but only for half a second, only while looking at the screen. The moment her eyes returned to McKenna, the warmth vanished. "And you're being compensated well, I assume?" Margaret asked. The way she said "compensated" made McKenna's skin crawl, like she was being paid for something dirty, something shameful. "It's all in the contract," McKenna said quietly. Margaret's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Ah, yes, contracts," she said. "Those always hold up so well when feelings get involved, don't they?" Grayson's jaw tightened. "Mom, no, I think it's important we're all clear," Margaret interrupted, eyes still locked on McKenna. "I'd love to hear what feelings my son's maid has in this situation." Maid. The word landed like a slap. McKenna felt it in her chest, in her throat, in the pit of her stomach where shame lived even when she didn't want it to. Maid. Not surrogate. Not partner. Not person. Maid. Ever been judged by your job or where you're from? That pain is real. Share this if you've felt it too. "She's not just," Grayson started. "Isn't she?" Margaret cut him off. "She cleans your apartment twice a week. That's the definition of a maid, darling. Let's not pretend this is something it's not." McKenna's hands curled into fists beneath the thin paper sheet. She wanted to say something, wanted to stand up and tell this woman exactly what she thought of her pearl earrings, and her cold eyes, and her need to make other people feel small, just to feel big. But she didn't. Because Margaret Hale was right about one thing. McKenna was the help, had always been the help, and no contract, no baby, no amount of money would change that in the eyes of people like her. "We're done here," Grayson said tightly, helping McKenna sit up. "Thank you," he said to the nurse. Then he turned to his mother. "We'll talk later." Margaret smiled, cold, sharp. "I'm sure we will." In the hallway, McKenna walked fast, head down, trying not to cry. Grayson kept pace beside her. "McKenna, I'm sorry. She had no right. She had every right," McKenna said, voice shaking. "She's your mother, and I am your maid. That's what I was before this. That's what I'll be after." "That's not true, isn't it?" She stopped, turned to face him. "Look at me, Grayson," she said. "Really, look. I clean toilets for a living. I live in a place where the ceiling shakes when the train passes. I'm carrying your baby because I needed the money to keep my mother alive. Your mom didn't say anything that isn't true. She made it sound dirty," he said. "Like you're using me. Like this is something it's not." McKenna's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "Maybe it is," she whispered. She turned and walked toward the elevator. Grayson didn't follow. And as the doors closed between them, one thought drowned out everything else. The word "maid" had cut deeper than she expected, hard enough to make her wonder if she should have walked away when she still could. The appointment ended, but the tension didn't. McKenna stood by the elevator, arms wrapped around herself, waiting for the doors to open so she could disappear. But Margaret's heels clicked closer. "We need to talk," Margaret said, voice low, controlled. McKenna didn't turn around. I think you said enough in there. No, Margaret said, stepping closer. Close enough that McKenna could smell her perfume. Expensive. Suffocating. I don't think I did. The elevator dinged. Doors opened. McKenna stepped inside. Margaret followed. The doors closed, trapping them in a small steel box with nowhere to run. I'm going to be very clear, Margaret said, voice soft enough that only McKenna could hear. I don't trust this. McKenna pressed the button for the lobby. Hard. Good thing I'm not asking for your trust. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Do you know how many women would kill for the chance you've gotten? She asked. To be in his home? To have his child? To have that kind of money dropped in their lap? I didn't kill anyone, McKenna said, jaw tight. Not yet, Margaret murmured. But I've seen what greed does to people. I've seen girls like you decide they want more. Custody battles. A piece of the estate. A last name. McKenna turned to face her. Girls like me? She repeated. Say what you really mean. Margaret smiled. Cold. Sharp. Poor girls, she said. Desperate girls. Girls who see my son as a meal ticket instead of a person. The words hit like fists. You don't know anything about me, McKenna said. I know enough, Margaret replied. I know you're carrying my granddaughter because you need money for your mother's treatment. I know you clean houses for a living. I know my son looks at you like you're something more than what you are. She stepped closer. And that, she said, is what worries me. The elevator stopped. Lobby level. The doors opened, but neither of them moved. You think I'm trying to trap him? McKenna said quietly. You think I'm some gold digger who saw an opportunity and took it, aren't you? Margaret asked. McKenna's hands shook. I signed a contract, she said. A legal contract that says I hand over his baby the moment she's born. I don't get custody. I don't get visitation. I don't get anything except money and a memory I'll carry for the rest of my life. Her voice cracked. So no, Mrs. Hale. I'm not trying to trap your son. I'm just trying to survive. Margaret's expression didn't change. My husband had an affair once, she said suddenly. Years ago. With a nurse at a clinic. She was young. Pretty. He said she understood him in ways I didn't. McKenna's blood ran cold. When I found out, Margaret continued, I forgave him. Because that's what women like me do. We forgive. We forget. We pretend it never happened. She tilted her head. But I never forgot her face. Or the way she looked at him. Like he was salvation instead of a married man with responsibilities. McKenna felt like the floor was falling out from under her. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. Don't you? Margaret asked. You look at my son the same way. Like he's saving you. Like he's more than a paycheck. And that, McKenna, is dangerous. The elevator doors started to close. Margaret stepped out. Stay in your lane, she said, or I'll make sure you regret it. The doors shut. McKenna stood alone in the elevator, shaking, breathing hard. Her phone buzzed. A text from Grayson. Where are you? Let me drive you home. She stared at the message, then typed back, I need space. I'll take the subway. She turned off her phone before he could respond. Outside, the city swallowed her whole. People everywhere. Cars honking. Sirens wailing. The world moving fast and loud and indifferent. McKenna walked for blocks before she realized she was crying. Before she realized her hand was on her stomach. Protecting something that wasn't even hers to protect. Margaret's words echoed in her head. Girls like you. Stay in your lane. You look at my son like he's saving you. She stopped on a corner. Leaned against a building. Let the tears come. Because Margaret was wrong about a lot of things. But maybe she wasn't wrong about everything. Maybe McKenna did look at Grayson like he was more than a paycheck. Maybe she had started to forget that this was temporary. Maybe she'd let herself imagine, just for a second, that she belonged in his world. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. She pulled out her phone, turned it back on. 17 missed calls from Grayson. 3 texts. Please talk to me. I'm sorry. Let me explain. But McKenna didn't want explanations. She wanted to breathe somewhere that wasn't bought. Somewhere that didn't smell like expensive perfume and judgment. somewhere that didn't make her feel like she was one wrong move away from losing everything. She put her phone away, kept walking, and wondered, for the first time since signing that contract, if maybe Margaret wasn't completely wrong. What if Margaret wasn't completely wrong? McKenna didn't go back to the penthouse the next day, or the day after. When the agency called asking why she'd missed her cleaning shift, she said simply, "I'm done with that client." Then, she hung up. 2 days later, she took the subway to Midtown, rode the elevator up to the agency's sleek office on the 23rd floor. Glass walls, modern furniture, a receptionist who smiled like she was paid to pretend everything was fine. "I need to speak to someone," McKenna said, "about my contract." The woman behind the desk looked surprised. "Miss Brooks," she said, typing something into her computer. "Is everything okay? Is there a problem with Mr. Hale's arrangement?" "Yes," McKenna said. "Me." They put her in a small conference room. White walls, a table, 2 chairs, a window overlooking the city that made her feel small. A woman in a gray suit walked in 10 minutes later. Tablet in hand, expression neutral. "McKenna," she said, sitting down. "I'm Linda. I oversee your case. What's going on?" McKenna placed the contract on the table. "I want out," she said. Linda's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Out?" she repeated. "Out of the contract. Out of this arrangement. I don't want to do this anymore." Linda set down her tablet, folded her hands. "That's complicated," she said carefully. "Why?" "Because you're already 14 weeks pregnant," Linda said. "At this stage, medically and legally, backing out isn't simple." McKenna's chest tightened. "You told me I could change my mind," she said. "You said there was a window, that if I decided I couldn't do it, I could walk away." "We did say that," Linda agreed. "But that window closed at 12 weeks. You're past the embryo in lab stage. The pregnancy is established. If you back out now, the only options are termination or carrying the baby to term with a completely new legal arrangement." The word termination made McKenna's stomach lurch. She thought about the heartbeat she'd heard 2 days ago. Fast, fierce, real. She thought about Grayson's face when he'd heard it. Like it was the only thing keeping him alive. "Would he still be able to keep her if I refused the money?" McKenna asked quietly. Linda sighed. "Maybe," she said. "You'd need lawyers, a custody agreement, new contracts. It would be messy, expensive, emotionally devastating for everyone involved." She leaned forward. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Did something happen? Did Mr. Hale do something?" "No," McKenna said quickly. "He didn't do anything. He's been good to me." Too good, she thought but didn't say. "Then what is it?" Linda pressed. McKenna stared at her hands. "His mother looks at me like I'm dirt under her shoes," she said. "She called me a maid, in front of him, in front of the nurse. Like that's all I am. Like carrying his baby doesn't change that." Her voice broke. "I don't want this baby growing up hearing I'm some gold-digging maid who trapped her dad. I don't want the rest of my life tied to people who think they're better than me because they have money. Sometimes, the walls close in, and there's no easy way out. If you've ever felt stuck, you're not alone. Comment below." Linda's face softened. "I understand," she said gently. "But this is bigger than feelings. There's a child in the middle of this. A child who's already growing, already real. Are you sure running is the answer?" McKenna bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste copper. "I don't know," she whispered. "What I do know," Linda said, "is that you have options. You can renegotiate terms. You can set boundaries. You can require that his mother has no contact with you for the remainder of the pregnancy. But walking away now? That's not just walking away from a contract. It's walking away from a baby you've already started to carry." McKenna's hand moved to her stomach. She felt the small curve there, barely noticeable under her shirt, but real. So real. "What if I can't do it?" McKenna asked. "What if I hand her over and it breaks me? What if I spend the rest of my life wondering if she's okay? If he tells her about me? If she hates me for giving her away?" "Those are valid fears," Linda said. "But they're also fears you'll have whether you walk away now or carry through. The difference is, Right now, you have a contract. You have protection. You have a plan. If you walk away, you have nothing but chaos. McKenna closed her eyes. She thought about her mother, about the chemo bills stacking up, about Jana asking if they'd have to move again. She thought about Grayson, about the way he looked at the ultrasound screen like it held his entire future. She thought about Margaret, about the word maid, and the way it had cut deeper than any insult she'd ever heard. And she realized something terrifying. She wasn't sure anymore if she was trying to protect herself or if she was trying to punish Grayson for making her feel something she wasn't supposed to feel. I need time, McKenna said, standing up. I need to think. Take all the time you need, Linda said. But, McKenna, don't make this decision out of fear. Make it because you know, deep down, it's the right thing to do. McKenna nodded. But as she walked out of that office and back into the chaos of the city, she realized something that made her stomach drop. She wasn't sure of anything anymore. Except that, for the first time in a long time, she was more scared of staying than leaving. The knock came 2 days later. McKenna was in the kitchen, heating up leftovers, when she heard it. 3 sharp raps on the door. Her mother called out from the bedroom. I'll get it, Layla said, shuffling toward the door in her worn slippers. McKenna turned off the stove, listened, heard her mother open the door, heard voices, one tired and familiar, the other crisp, controlled, cold. McKenna's stomach dropped. She walked to the doorway just as Lila stepped back, face pale. Standing in their narrow hallway, looking completely out of place, was Margaret Hale. No designer coat this time, no pearls, just a simple blouse and slacks. Hair pulled back, eyes shadowed with something that looked almost like exhaustion. What are you doing here? McKenna asked, stepping between her mother and this woman who'd already done enough damage. Margaret's gaze moved past McKenna, landed on Layla, and her face went white. You, Margaret whispered. Layla's hand gripped the doorframe. I think you have the wrong house, she said, voice shaking. Margaret reached into her bag, pulled out an envelope. Old, worn, the kind you keep hidden for years because throwing it away feels like admitting defeat. She opened it, pulled out a photograph, handed it to McKenna without a word. McKenna's hands trembled as she took it. It was the same photo her mother had shown her weeks ago, but wider. Young Layla standing outside a diner, smiling, hand hooked through the arm of Henry Hale in his expensive suit. But there was someone else in the frame now, someone McKenna hadn't seen before because her mother's version had been cropped, a teenage girl with soft curls and warm brown eyes, standing slightly behind Henry, watching him with the kind of adoration daughters have for fathers before they learn to see them clearly. Elise. McKenna's breath caught. My husband carried copies of himself everywhere, Margaret said quietly, eyes still fixed on Layla. Business cards, photos, lies. She took a step forward. I found this in his things after he died, she continued, tucked in the back of his desk drawer. I didn't recognize you at first. It's been what? 25 years? But I remember now. Layla closed her eyes. You were his nurse, Margaret said, at the clinic on the Upper East Side. I came in once for an appointment. You brought me water, asked if I needed anything. I thought you were kind. Her voice hardened. I didn't know you were sleeping with my husband. I wasn't sleeping with anyone's husband, Layla said, voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. He told me he was separated, that the divorce was almost final. I only found out the truth when I got pregnant, and he stopped returning my calls. Margaret's jaw tightened. And you never told him about the baby? I sent a letter, Layla said, to his office. It came back unopened, so I made a choice. I decided I'd rather raise my daughter alone than beg a man who clearly didn't want us. Your daughter, Margaret repeated slowly. Her gaze shifted to McKenna, really looked at her for the first time, at the curve of her jaw, the shape of her nose, the eyes that were darker than Henry's but carried the same intensity. How old are you? Margaret asked. 24, McKenna whispered. Margaret did the math in her head. Her face crumpled for just a second before she pulled it back together. Elise was 15 when this photo was taken, she said, which means Henry was already lying to me, already stepping out. already building a second life I knew nothing about. She looked back at Layla. I hated you when I saw this photo, she admitted. I thought you'd stolen something from me. From Elise. From our family. I stole nothing, Layla said firmly. He lied to both of us. Margaret nodded slowly. Yes, she said. He did. Then she turned to McKenna, and the way she looked at her changed. Not with warmth, not with acceptance, but with something that felt like recognition. You're more than his mistake, Margaret said quietly. Whether you like it or not, you're tangled up in our family now. By blood. She gestured toward McKenna's stomach. That child is my granddaughter, she said. And your niece. The words hung in the air like smoke. McKenna's knees went weak. What? She whispered. Margaret's expression didn't change. Elise was your half-sister, she said. Which means the baby you're carrying isn't just Grayson's daughter. She's your niece. Your blood. McKenna's hand moved to her stomach, to the small life growing there. The daughter of the sister she never got to meet. The niece she'd been carrying without knowing. Does Grayson know? She asked, voice barely there. Not yet, Margaret said. I came here because I owed you the truth first. But the longer we wait to tell him, the worse this gets. Layla reached for McKenna's hand, squeezed. We don't owe her anything, she said. No, Margaret agreed, but we owe that baby everything. And keeping this secret, that's not fair to her, or to any of us. McKenna stared at the photo, at her mother, at her father, at the sister she'd never known, at the tangled web of lies and blood and fate that had brought them all to this moment. And by the looks of it, from my granddaughter's aunt, the room felt too small for so much truth. McKenna sank onto the couch, hand instinctively moving to her stomach, like she could protect the baby from all of this just by holding on tight enough. Aunt, she repeated, voice hollow. I'm her aunt. Margaret moved deeper into the apartment without being invited, set the photo on the coffee table like evidence in a trial. That man, she said, tapping Henry's face with one manicured finger, was my husband. He was also a liar, a cheater, a man who thought he could build two families and keep them separate forever. She looked at Lila. I didn't know about you, McKenna, she said. Not when you were born, not when Elise was growing up, not until I found this photo last year, after Henry died. Her voice cracked on his name. I hated you when I saw it, she admitted, looking at Layla. I thought you'd stolen something from me. From Elise, from the life I thought I had. I stole nothing, Layla said, voice weak but firm. He came to me, told me he was separated, that his marriage was over, that he was just waiting for the paperwork to finalize. She leaned against the wall, exhausted. I only found out the truth when I called his office, and a secretary told me, congratulations on the pregnancy must be for his wife, not his mistress. Margaret flinched at the word. Did you ever tell him? She asked. About the baby? I sent a letter, Layla said, to his office address. It came back 3 weeks later, unopened, returned to sender. I took that as my answer. She looked at McKenna. I decided I'd rather raise my child without his money than beg for scraps of his attention. Margaret's eyes filled with something that might have been respect, or grief, or both. Congratulations, she said bitterly. You succeeded. I found out I had another daughter after my first one died. Silence pressed down on them, heavy, suffocating. McKenna's heart hammered in her ears. I'm not your daughter, she said. I'm a mistake your husband made. You're more than his mistake, Margaret replied. Whether you like it or not, you're tangled up in this family now. By blood, and by that baby, she pointed at McKenna's stomach. That child is my granddaughter, she said, and your niece. If this ever goes to court, and it will if you keep trying to run, the judge will want to know everything. The affair, the half-sister connection, all of it. Her voice hardened. I would rather we control the narrative than let some reporter with a camera turn this into a tabloid story. McKenna stared at the photo, at her mother, young and hopeful, at her father, smiling his polite, controlled smile, at the girl in the corner whose face she'd dusted 100 times in a penthouse kitchen. Her sister, some truths rewrite your whole life. Has a family secret ever changed everything for you? Share your story. Does Grayson know? McKenna asked again, voice barely a whisper. Not yet, Margaret said. I came here because I owed you the truth first, but the longer we wait to tell him, the more explosive this gets. Layla moved to sit beside McKenna, put her arm around her daughter's shaking shoulders. We don't have to do anything, she said softly. We can walk away, right now, pack our things and disappear. They have money, they have lawyers, but we have each other. McKenna wanted to say yes, wanted to run so far no one would ever find them, but her hand stayed on her stomach, on the baby who was half Grayson, half Elise, half her niece. I can't, McKenna whispered. She's already real. She's already mine in ways I don't understand. She's not yours, Margaret said bluntly. The contract is very clear about that. Then why does it feel like she is? McKenna shot back, tears streaming down her face. Why does it feel like I'm carrying my sister's last piece? Like if I walk away, I'm abandoning her all over again? Margaret's expression softened. Just a fraction. Because blood is complicated, she said, and DNA doesn't care about contracts or money, or who was supposed to love who. She sat down in the chair across from them, looked older suddenly. Tired. I should have known, she said quietly. When you walked into that clinic and I saw your face, something about you reminded me of Elise. The way you hold yourself. The way you look at my son like you're seeing someone real instead of a bank account. She closed her eyes. I was cruel to you, because I was scared, she admitted. Scared you'd take what was left of my family. Scared Grayson would replace Elise with you. Scared I'd lose another daughter before I even got to know her. McKenna's breath caught. I'm not trying to replace anyone, she said. I know, Margaret said, but that doesn't change what you are. Elise's sister, my husband's daughter, the mother of my granddaughter's aunt. She stood up. We need to tell Grayson, she said. Tonight, before this gets any worse. McKenna looked at her mother, then at Margaret, then down at the baby growing inside her, and she knew, with a certainty that felt like drowning, that once Grayson knew the truth, nothing would ever be the same. The question wasn't if it would explode. The question was how much damage it would do when it did. The more explosive this would get. Grayson's hands trembled before he even knew why. He'd gotten McKenna's text 20 minutes ago. We need to talk. In person. Your place. Short, urgent, terrifying. He'd been pacing the penthouse ever since, running through every worst-case scenario. She was backing out. She was sick. Something was wrong with the baby. He didn't expect to walk into his kitchen and find his mother sitting at the island, or McKenna standing by the sink, eyes red, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding herself together by force, or the old photograph on the marble counter between them. What's going on? He asked. Nobody answered. He walked closer, picked up the photo. His father, younger, smiling that controlled smile Grayson had inherited, standing beside a woman he didn't recognize. And in the corner, barely in frame, a teenage girl with curly hair and warm eyes. Elise. His heart stopped. What is this? He asked, voice barely there. Margaret spoke first. Your father had an affair, she said. Flat, clinical, like she was reporting the weather. With that woman, Layla Brooks, McKenna's mother. The words didn't make sense. Grayson stared at the photo, then at McKenna, then back at the photo. My father, he said slowly, had an affair with her mother? Yes, Margaret said. His jaw clenched. And you knew? He asked, turning to her. You knew and didn't tell me? I found the photo after Elise died, Margaret said. After your father died. I put it away. Told myself it didn't matter anymore. Grayson's grip tightened on the photo. It mattered, he said, voice shaking. It mattered then, and it matters now. He looked at McKenna, at the curve of her jaw, the shape of her eyes, the way she'd always seemed familiar in a way he couldn't name. He's my father too, McKenna said quietly. The words landed like a physical blow. Grayson staggered back a step. He couldn't finish. Elise's half-sister. McKenna said. I didn't know. Not until my mom showed me the photo weeks ago. I saw the last name, and I thought maybe we were connected somehow. But I didn't know how. I didn't know. Her voice broke. I didn't know I was carrying my sister's baby. The room spun. Grayson set the photo down before he dropped it. His mind raced, trying to catch up, trying to process what this meant. McKenna wasn't just his surrogate. She was Elisa's sister. The baby wasn't just his daughter. She was McKenna's niece. Everything he thought he knew shattered. How long have you known? He asked McKenna. A few weeks, she admitted. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't even know if it mattered. If it mattered? He repeated, voice rising. McKenna, your family, you're Elisa's sister. How could that not matter? Margaret stood up. Don't blame her, she said. Blame me. Blame your father. Blame the lies we all told to protect ourselves. Grayson turned on her. You called her a maid, he said, voice low. Dangerous. In the clinic, you looked at her like she was nothing. And the whole time, she was… He stopped, pressed his hands against the counter. She was what? Margaret challenged. More than you ever gave her credit for, Grayson said. He looked at McKenna, really looked at her. Not as the help, not as the surrogate, not as a transaction, as Elisa's sister, as someone who'd been carrying grief and secrets and blood ties she didn't ask for. I'm sorry, he said, for my mother, for my father, for all of it. McKenna shook her head. I'm not your responsibility, she said. I never was. Yes, you are, he said. The moment you agreed to carry my daughter, you became my responsibility. And now, he stopped, swallowed. Now you're family, he finished. Whether we planned it or not, Margaret's face hardened. Let's not get carried away, she said. She's Henry's mistake, not our family. Don't, Grayson said, voice sharp. Don't call her that. He stepped toward his mother. You don't get to decide who's family and who's not, he said. You don't get to erase her because her existence is inconvenient. Margaret's eyes flashed. I'm trying to protect you, she said. Protect this family. If this gets out, if people find out she's Henry's daughter and Elisa's sister, they'll say you manipulated her. They'll say you took advantage of her. I didn't manipulate anyone, Grayson said. Did you know? Margaret demanded. When you asked her to be your surrogate, did you know who she was? No, he said. I didn't know. Neither of us did. Margaret's expression didn't soften. Then you need to ask yourself something, she said. If you had known, would you still have asked her? Or would you have realized how unethical this is? Grayson opened his mouth, closed it, because he didn't have an answer. McKenna did. It doesn't matter, she said quietly. What's done is done. The baby is real. The contract is signed. We can't undo any of it. She looked at Grayson. But your mother's right about one thing, she said. People are going to talk. They're going to say terrible things. About me, about you, about this baby. Her hand moved to her stomach. I don't want her growing up in the middle of that, she whispered. Grayson crossed the kitchen, stood in front of her. Then we don't let them, he said. We control the story. We tell the truth before someone else does. And what is the truth? McKenna asked. He looked at her for a long moment. That fate had been playing with our lives long before either of us knew the rules. The headlines came first. Billionaire's maid carries late wife's embryo. But there's a twist. Surrogacy scandal in Manhattan. Love, money, and family secrets. Woman discovers she's pregnant with her half-sister's baby. Everyone had an opinion. None of them knew the full story. Grayson's lawyer had been blunt. File a petition now, she'd said, spreading documents across the conference table. Get ahead of this. Ask the court to validate the agreement and establish parental rights before the baby is born. If you don't, someone else will on their terms. Someone like who? McKenna had asked. The media, the lawyer said. Extended family. Anyone with a lawyer and an agenda. So they found themselves standing in a downtown courtroom that smelled like old wood and broken promises. McKenna wore Tiana's blazer, the only professional thing she owned. Her hands shook as she smoothed down the fabric. Grayson stood beside her in a dark suit that suddenly looked more like armor than wealth. Margaret sat in the row behind them, hands folded, face unreadable. The courtroom filled quickly. Reporters, strangers, people who'd seen the headlines and wanted to watch the drama unfold in real time. McKenna felt their eyes on her, judging, calculating, deciding if she was a victim or a villain. The judge entered, a black woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and an expression that said she'd heard every lie and truth the world had to offer. "All rise," the bailiff said. They stood. The judge sat. "This is in the matter of Hale versus Brooks," she said, reading from her file. "A petition to validate a gestational surrogacy agreement." She looked up. "Miss Brooks," she said, "you entered into a surrogacy agreement with Mr. Hale, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," McKenna said. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "You are carrying an embryo genetically belonging to the late Mrs. Elise Hale and Mr. Grayson Hale?" "Yes, Your Honor." The judge flipped a page. "And you have since discovered that you are the biological half-sister of the late Mrs. Hale, making you the child's maternal aunt?" Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. "Yes, Your Honor," McKenna said. The judge leaned back in her chair, took off her glasses, looked at McKenna, then at Grayson, then at the file, like it might have different answers if she read it again. "Well," she said, "that's a first." Soft laughter broke the tension, but it didn't last. "Mr. Hale," the judge continued, "do you still wish to move forward with this arrangement knowing all of this?" Grayson didn't hesitate. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. "I do." "And Miss Brooks, do you still consent to carrying this child to term and relinquishing parental rights upon birth?" McKenna's throat tightened. Every eye in the room was on her, waiting. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. "I do." The judge studied them both for a long moment. "I'm going to be honest," she said. "This is complicated. The familial connection raises ethical questions. The financial arrangement raises concerns about coercion, and the media attention raises concerns about this child's future privacy." She paused. "But I've reviewed the contract. I've reviewed the medical records. I've reviewed the psychological evaluations. And I don't see evidence of manipulation or exploitation." She looked directly at McKenna. "Miss Brooks, do you feel coerced in any way? Pressured? Forced into this arrangement?" "No, Your Honor," McKenna said. "Do you understand that once you relinquish parental rights, you will have no legal claim to this child?" "I understand." "And you're willing to carry your niece, knowing you'll have to hand her over to her father?" McKenna's eyes filled. "Yes," she whispered, "because she deserves to be with her father, and because I made a promise." The judge's expression softened, just slightly. "Mr. Hale," she said, "are you prepared to raise this child alone, without the support of her biological mother or aunt, beyond what the contract stipulates?" "Yes, Your Honor," Grayson said. "I am." The judge shuffled her papers. The room held its breath. The world judges stories it doesn't understand. If this moved you, others need to see it. Share it. "Here's what I need to decide," the judge said. "Is this arrangement in the best interest of the unborn child? That's the only question that matters." She looked at the file again, at McKenna's medical records, at Grayson's financial statements, at the psychological evaluations that said they were both sound, both capable, both willing. "This child," the judge said slowly, "will be born into a complicated family. She'll grow up knowing her mother died before she could meet her. She'll grow up knowing her biological aunt carried her. She'll grow up with questions most children never have to ask." She paused. "But she'll also grow up loved, wanted, fought for." The courtroom was silent. McKenna's heart hammered so loud she thought everyone could hear it. The judge picked up her gavel. "This court finds the surrogacy agreement valid and enforceable," she said. "Upon birth, legal parentage will rest with Mr. Grayson Hale, with Miss McKenna Brooks recognized as the child's maternal aunt and gestational carrier." She looked at them both. "There is no evidence of coercion," she continued. "Only evidence of two people trying to do right by a child who didn't ask to be born into chaos." She paused. "What I see here," she said, is complicated love. The gavel came down. Final. Binding. McKenna's knees wobbled. Grayson reached out, steadied her. Outside, the flash of cameras hit them like lightning. Reporters swarmed. Microphones thrust forward. Questions shouted over each other. McKenna, are you in love with him? Grayson, are you replacing your wife? Is this about money or grief? McKenna's stomach turned. Grayson stepped in front of her, blocking the worst of it. No comment, he said tightly. Not today. They pushed through the crowd, down the courthouse steps. At the bottom, McKenna stopped, looked back at the building, at the place where one sentence from a judge had just rewritten all of their lives. One sentence from this woman could rewrite all of their lives. They finally broke through the crowd at the bottom of the courthouse steps, cameras still flashing behind them, questions still being shouted. The world still hungry for pieces of their story they weren't ready to give. McKenna stopped, put her hand on the stone railing, breathed. I'm sorry, she said suddenly, not looking at him. Grayson turned, confused. For what? For dragging you into this mess, she said. For having the wrong father, the wrong background. For being, stop, he said. He stepped in front of her, close enough that she had to look up to see his face. You didn't drag me anywhere, he said. I asked you to do the hardest thing anyone could ever do for me. You said yes. You've carried my child, faced my mother, faced the media, faced a courtroom full of strangers who think they know your story. His voice softened. If anyone should apologize, it's me. For what? She asked, voice shaking. For not seeing sooner how much I was asking of you, he said. For pretending I could keep this clinical, professional, like you were just a means to an end. He swallowed hard. This stopped being just about biology a long time ago, he admitted. McKenna's breath caught. Grayson, the court decided who her father is, he said, cutting her off gently. They decided the legalities, the contracts, the parental rights. He paused. But what I haven't figured out yet, he said, is what I'm allowed to be to you. The words hung between them. Heavy, dangerous, real. A reporter shouted something behind them. Cameras clicked. The world kept moving. But in that moment, it felt like only the two of them existed. You're not allowed to be anything to me, McKenna whispered. The contract is very clear about that. I know what the contract says, Grayson said. I'm asking what you want. McKenna's eyes filled with tears. It doesn't matter what I want, she said. I'm carrying your dead wife's baby, your sister-in-law, your employee. There's no version of this where we get a happy ending. Why not? Because the world doesn't work that way, she said. Not for people like me. People like you, he repeated. What does that mean? Poor people, she said. Black people. People who clean other people's houses and ride the subway and live in apartments where the ceiling shakes. Her voice cracked. People who don't belong in your world. Grayson's jaw tightened. You think I care about any of that? He asked. I think you should, McKenna said. Because your mother does. Because the media does. Because every single person in that courtroom was looking at me and wondering what kind of girl gets pregnant for money. They don't know you, Grayson said. Neither do you, McKenna shot back. He stepped closer. I know you cry when you think no one's listening, he said. I know you fold blankets that don't belong to you because you care about things even when you're not supposed to. I know you laugh at terrible jokes and eat your feelings in cheap takeout and text your mother 3 times a day to make sure she's okay. He held her gaze. I know you, he said, and I'm not pretending anymore that I don't want more. McKenna's heart hammered against her ribs. You can't want more, she whispered. She's not even born yet. The contract says, I walk away the moment she is. We don't get to rewrite that just because we caught feelings. Why not? He asked again. Because it's not fair to her, McKenna said. She deserves stability, clarity, a father who's not confused about what her aunt means to him. I'm not confused, Grayson said. Then what are you? He reached up, brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Terrified, he admitted, that I'm going to lose you the way I lost Elise. That you're going to walk out of my life the moment this is over, and I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been different. McKenna closed her eyes. We can't do this, she said. We're already doing it, he said. And he was right. They'd been doing it for months. Every grocery delivery, every doctor's appointment, every late-night text and early morning phone call. Every moment he'd shown up when she needed someone, and every moment she'd let him. They'd been choosing each other without saying it out loud. The judge said, complicated love, Grayson said quietly. Like that's a bad thing. Like love is supposed to be simple. He leaned his forehead against hers. But nothing about us has been simple, he said. From the moment you walked into my apartment with your cleaning caddy and your walls up, nothing has been simple. And I don't want simple. I want real. McKenna's breath hitched. What if real isn't enough? She whispered. What if it is? He asked. His lips were so close to hers, close enough that if she just moved an inch, she could kiss him, could cross the line they'd been dancing around for months, could choose him the way he was choosing her, but she didn't move, because once she crossed that line, there was no going back. And she wasn't sure if that terrified her, or if it was exactly what she wanted. His confession hung in the air, waiting for her response. That night, McKenna lay in her small bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The city lights leaked through thin curtains. The train passed. The walls shook. Everything was the same, but nothing was. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Grayson. You awake? She stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. Yeah. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I can't stop thinking about what I said today. McKenna's chest tightened. Me neither. Did I make things worse? She thought about lying, about saying yes, about pushing him away before this got any more complicated. But she was tired of lying. No, she typed. You made them real. The dots appeared again. Longer this time. Can I ask you something? Sure. If Elise was here, do you think she'd hate me for this? McKenna pressed her hand to her stomach, felt the small flutter that might have been a kick or just her imagination. She thought about the sister she'd never met, the girl in the diner photo with soft curls and hopeful eyes, the woman in the wedding frame who'd loved this man enough to try 3 times to give him a baby, the laugh that still echoed through a penthouse kitchen. No, she typed slowly. I think she'd be mad at your dad, mad at the world, mad that she didn't get to see her daughter grow up. She paused, swallowed. But I think she'd love that her daughter is surrounded by people who chose her, who fought for her, who didn't let the world's opinions decide her future. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. What about you? He finally wrote. Do you choose her? McKenna's eyes filled with tears. Every day, she typed, even if it breaks me. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, and me? Do you choose me too? Or am I still just your boss with a contract? McKenna stared at the question until the letters blurred. Because this was it. The moment she'd been avoiding since the day she fell asleep on his shoulder. Since the day he showed up with ginger ale. Since the day he sat on her floor and told her she didn't have to hide. Somewhere between scrubbing his counters and signing her name on that contract, between morning sickness and courtrooms and family secrets she never asked for, she'd made a choice she'd never planned to make. She had started to carry something she wasn't supposed to, his heart, and maybe, somewhere along the way, he'd started carrying hers too. Her thumb hovered over the screen. The city lights flickered outside her window. The train passed again. The walls shook again. But for once, McKenna didn't feel trapped by them. She felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a life beyond these walls, beyond this apartment. Beyond everything she'd been told she was allowed to want. What happens if I say yes? She typed. The response came fast. I don't know, but we figure it out. Together. The contract says. Forget the contract. I'm asking what you want. McKenna closed her eyes. What did she want? She wanted her mother to live. She wanted Jana to go to college. She wanted to stop choosing between survival and living. But she also wanted this, wanted the man who saw her when she was invisible, wanted the father who loved his daughter before she was born. wanted the person who made her believe she was more than what the world said she was. "I'm scared," she typed. "Me too. What if we mess this up? What if we don't?" McKenna's heart raced. She thought about Margaret's words. "Stay in your lane." She thought about the reporters shouting questions. "Are you in love with him?" She thought about the contract sitting in a folder somewhere, telling her exactly what she was allowed to be and nothing more. And then she thought about the baby, about the daughter who would grow up asking questions. Who would want to know why her aunt looked sad in photos? Why her father looked at McKenna like she was something he'd lost? She deserved better than that. They all did. McKenna's fingers moved across the screen. But before she could type the words that would change everything, another text came through. "You don't have to answer now. I just needed you to know. I choose you, McKenna. However this ends, whatever happens, I choose you." And in that moment, with her hand on her stomach and her heart in her throat and the truth sitting heavy on her chest, McKenna realized something. If this story broke you even a little, don't let it end here. Share it. Someone else needs to feel this too. She'd spent her whole life being chosen last, by her father who walked away, by a world that saw her as help instead of human, by a system that made her rent her body just to keep her mother alive. But Grayson had chosen her first. Before he knew her blood, before he knew her value, before he knew if she'd stay or run, he'd chosen her. And maybe it was time she chose herself. Her thumb moved over the keyboard. The words formed slowly, carefully, honestly. And as she hit send, she wondered one last thing. If she told him the truth right now, that she'd fallen for him somewhere between the marble counters and the heartbeat monitors, between the fear and the hope, between who she was and who she could be, would it ruin everything? Or would it finally set them both free?